So what exactly are EMNCs? Well, EMNCs, as the name already implies, are multinational companies originating from an emerging market. An emerging market can be distinguished from developing economies by the fact that they are improving their economic and political stability and establishing a more reliable legal infrastructure. Despite their best efforts, they are still noticeably behind the developed economies, therefore they are called emerging markets. As these markets became more business friendly, they soon experienced a huge inflow of foreign investment and foreign company establishments. As their economies expanded, a relatively new phenomenon occurred, namely homegrown multinational companies. The relative advantages of these emerging multinational companies were very cheap labor and also cheap materials, as their natural resources were often untouched and very easy to access. They also had much better knowledge of local institutions and mostly had deep connections with the local governments, which granted them easier access to financing and less regulations.
While there are some differences between Apple and Huawei, they still share a key characteristic. Similarity is present the most with the manufacturing part. They produce or acquire parts for the mobile devices outside the host HQ. While Apple parts supplies range from Mongolia, China, Korea and Taiwan, Huawei produces some parts at home and also has suppliers across the world such as India, Japan and Canada. Now the differences. One of the key things that jumps out the most is the ownership scheme. While Apple is majority owned by a couple of key individuals such as the CEO Tim Cook, Huawei is almost entirely employee owned. As huge as the Chinese company is, its owner and CEO Ren Zhengfei only has total of 1.42% share of the company. Another thing that's obviously different is the competitive advantage. While Apple focuses on maintaining the image of the premium brand by just releasing one big model at a premium price, Huawei has a completely different approach. Instead of releasing a phone that might be a direct competition to Apple, they also produce several other models in order so they can satisfy more customer segments and also to expand their brand name.
When we take a closer look at Tata in comparison to one of its European equivalents, we can see a number of similarities and differences. First, ownership. Well, Tata Motors is owned by the Tata Group, which in turn is owned by the Tata Sons, which are basically the descendants of Jametsi Tata, who is the original founder of the company. Interestingly, despite the fact that Volkswagen has an extremely complex ownership structure, it also comes down to a family-owned business, by which it's owned by the Porsche and the Piech families. When it comes to production, Tata's vehicles are exclusively produced in their home countries. So the Tata Motors are produced in India and Land Rovers and Jaguars in UK. In the Volkswagen Group we can see a similar pattern, in which the actual Volkswagens are still being produced in Germany, but its sub-brands in their home countries as well, so such as Seat in Spain, Bentley in the UK and Skoda in Czech. When it comes to research and development strategies, we can see that Tata places its R&D centers close to its corresponding manufacturer plants, which means that they're extremely dispersed throughout the country. Volkswagen, on the other hand, develops its components almost completely centrally and then uses these components with only minor adjustments throughout its portfolio mix. We can also see clear differences in the market segmentation strategies, by which Tata mainly targets the cheapest segment and Volkswagen has a very broad one, offering cars of the value of 15,000 euros or 2 million euros plus, and anything in between.
Are emerging national companies a threat, and what can the Western companies learn from them? Now, the main reason that the emerging multinational companies are a potential threat to Westerners is that they have more availability and accessibility to natural resources and cost efficiency regarding labor and raw materials. Another advantage EMNCs have is that the Western companies tend to be more in the spotlight due to the negative reputation, such as Apple, when it comes to people working in sweatshops. Now, one of the things that Western multinational companies might adopt would be the employee ownership, making any potential buyout, which might be a bit unlikely in the case of Apple but still relevant, relatively more difficult to perform.
The presence of emerging markets doesn't have to be seen solely as a threat, but also as an opportunity to learn. These multinational companies are, for example, really good at getting to know local communities all over the world and learn about their problems and needs. They also invest a lot in talent development and create new, innovative products that satisfy the unique needs of their customers, which is something that Western companies sometimes struggle with.
Tata Motor relates to Barlett and Glocal Transnational Topology with the joint venture they have with Fiat Chrysler, and in this way they achieve global efficiency as well as worldwide learning. The joint venture gives them the ability to share the knowledge with different parts of the world, as well as receiving the knowledge from Fiat Chrysler, which also brings them the international flexibility. At the same time, Tata Motors is owner of a couple other brands coming from Asia and Europe, which gives them further ability to learn, develop efficiency and flexibility. In this way, the knowledge can be shared, which gives them the ability to work on multiple markets, not only market of personal vehicles, but also commercial vehicles, coaches, buses, military vehicles, and etc. On the other hand, Huawei doesn't do much joint ventures, but they spend a lot of money on research and development. This brings them international flexibility, because in this way they can gather knowledge from the Western world and design their products in the way they satisfy Western needs as well as need recognized on their home market. The same thing brings them worldwide learning, mostly from Europe, since their sales have risen for 40% in 2015. Huawei has research and development departments all around the world, so they can gather quite a lot of information. They also spend a lot of money on marketing, which gives them the global recognition and international flexibility. Huawei also achieves international flexibility through small production of components in Japan, India and Canada. In this way they also achieve global efficiency from lowering production costs.
That's all, folks.